Hi, everyone. So good to see you. I've been around here before, so it's great to see so many of you again and to see new faces as well. Um, I'm not sure if the worst time to speak is right before lunch when I'm what's keeping you from lunch or right after when you're in a food coma. So, I'm gonna risk it and hope that this was good for everybody and maybe hunger will keep you awake. I play sort of two roles in the rare disease community. At MGH, I work within the Center for Rare Neurologic Disorders, helping foster patient advocacy for a number of ultra rare diseases. So I've had the great honor of working with the MSMDS APTA2 community for the past few years. I do that for a number of ultra rare diseases. Outside of that, for the past 13 years, I've been the executive director for a different ultra rare disease. So I kind of have had my feet in the patient advocacy world for quite some time. And what I really want to do today is talk a little bit about kind of patient advocacy, the rare disease patient advocacy journey. And I'm really focusing, we're going to shift from talking about the kids to talking about you guys and lifting the bar on patient advocacy so that all of you in this room, on Zoom, and those are the parents who aren't even here, can really begin to understand how you can fundamentally engage with the role of being patient advocates in an entirely new way. Now I'm going to try to see if I can actually make this new. Oh my God. So I showed this slide once previously, and I'm not going to linger on it terribly, but I always think it's a good idea for us to locate ourselves on the journey toward treatments and therapeutics. And, I really am excited to sort of share that the community is really fundamentally kind of in this middle zone here, in the sort of middle pillar. And I don't want to focus too much on this slide. You're welcome to see it kind of at any other point. I'm happy to share these slides. The top tier here is kind of what investigators, what your scientists are focusing on at this period of time. The bottom tier here is what the patient advocacy community focuses on in parallel track to move the process forward toward therapeutics and treatments. And I really just want to focus on this slide for two reasons. One is to emphasize to you that in tandem with all of the extraordinary things your scientists and researchers and doctors are doing, there is a substantial task for the patient community to be doing at the same time. And the other is really to emphasize that there is an ecosystem at play. Another way of putting that is to say that it all happens in collaboration together. If only this is happening, a treatment pipeline doesn't exist. It doesn't just happen with this taking place. These are not just sort of extra nice sprinkles on top of the cupcake. These are essential pieces of what it takes to create a treatment. And so at another time, we can talk about each of these. And in fact, I'm going to highlight some of these later. But I want to have you see yourselves as essential and fundamental parts of that pipeline. To make it a little bit more particular, I want to tell you a story about my friend, who's pictured here with his wife. This is Terry Privilakis and his wife, Georgia, their adorable son, Michael. Terry's actually quite well known in the rare disease community now, but Michael was diagnosed at 2 years old with a rather extraordinarily terrible ultra-rare neurodegenerative disease, SPG. It's a form of hereditary spastic paraplegia, and then he was diagnosed at 2 years old. Terry worked in a bank doing IT. He's not a scientist. He knew nothing about rare diseases. He, in fact, is a lot like most of you when his child was diagnosed with a disease he'd never heard of, his doctors had never really heard of, lived outside of Toronto, kind of, I don't really know what to do. After his brief period of, I don't really know what to do, Terry and Georgia really immediately said to themselves, no one's coming to save us. There wasn't an organization for SPG 50, and they kind of said, we need to be the change that our son needs. They did a lot of things. They liquidated their savings, they began fundraising, started a patient advocacy group, and they basically took responsibility for deciding to treat Michael. Within 3 years, they had gathered world-class scientists to create a gene therapy, and Michael was the first child treated with gene therapy for SPG50. There's a lot more to say about the Privilockis' story, how Michael's doing, all of that kind of stuff. I think it's a really illuminating story for a few reasons. Terry's just like all of us. He was just a regular guy working a job. But his approach to this, and there are a number of Terrys out there in the world, he's not a really exceptional guy, he's a great guy, really nice guy, was, I gotta do it, no one else is coming to save us. And Terry has formed a company, Alpida, that is working to try to reproduce that model for others. So I'm really interested in preparing for this presentation and just in general in my work as a patient advocate about what prompts people like Terry, and as I said, I know many other people in the patient advocacy world, to respond that way, to say, I have to get involved, no one's coming to save me. And so I began interviewing people and kind of saying, like, why? Why is that you? And these were really like the core things that I began hearing. No one else is going to make that change happen. As the parent, I actually have unique knowledge that can help. Getting involved will help me feel less powerless, will help me change that for myself. And I need a way to stay involved in the science and research. If I'm on the outside, I'm not going to have that. But if I'm on the inside, I do. And so I thought these were very interesting responses. And they began not only shaping my own thinking about patient advocacy, but began conversations with the ACTA2 Alliance about ways that we could engage others. So really what I want to do now is talk a little bit about these three areas. I want to talk about what it takes to kind of be the change for your child. I want to talk about a little bit of a mindset shift for while you're at this meeting. And I want to talk about what it means to take action. The first mindset shift that I want to talk about is how you regard this conference. I was delighted when we went around the room and people first introduced themselves, and people talked about how excited they were to be here, to hear from the researchers, to learn updates, and that kind of thing. That is absolutely a critical reason to be here. I also want to offer another reason that you're here, a really vital reason that you're here. You're not an observer. You're here to also learn how you can help move research forward. These are challenging times for research, not just in the United States, but globally. And I think I want you to begin putting on the mindset of what is needed from the patient community to move research forward. That's who you are here. I want you to be asking yourself as a parent and as a member of this community, what's needed for me to help move the research that you're going to be hearing all about forward? And I have ideas for you. You're not alone. I also want to say that this is the best opportunity for you to think about how you can participate with the ACTA2 Alliance. The members of the Alliance here, Dixie, Warren, Wendy, Autumn, all of you, others I can see here, Angela, who flew in.
Diane's back there somewhere.
Diana's here, or was here.
Yeah, what's that?
Every one of these people has a full-time job. They're exactly like you. I don't want to say they're not special. These guys are superheroes. They put on this conference. They are the main patient coordinators for this disease, like superheroes, but they're also just like you. They're parents of affected children who are trying to like hold it all together on a daily basis. You are them. There's no reason every single one of you is not centrally involved in this organization to make it all happen. It's not a big world. It's not a big disease. And the organization needs that power to make it happen. There's nobody else. There's nobody else out there. So change will come for your children when you realize that no one's coming to save you, that everybody is needed to do this together. Everyone's favorite topic. Love when I come to conferences and talk about fundraising. So look, here's the deal, folks. It's always been challenging to raise funds in the rare disease research world. We're not raising money for cancer, folks. There are fewer dollars out there at the federal level and in the grant space for rare disease research. It's just gotten a lot worse. Since January, approximately the last number that I saw, about $11 billion have been lost to universities through federal cuts. $11 billion, folks. That means that every lab is suffering. And that's especially true of rare disease research labs. That's just reality. Patient advocacy groups have always, even in the most flush times, been a vital sponsor of rare disease research. Vital. Patient advocacy groups need to think of themselves not only as partners in the research, participating in natural history studies, helping identify the patient population, but also as funding sponsors, because researchers are dependent upon that kind of assistance. It's also super important because I hear sometimes from some of you that we don't really know what's going on in the labs. We'd like more information about, where the research is at or what's happening, more frequent reports. Get a seat at the table, folks. Fund research. Get yourselves involved in the places where you want to have that kind of engagement, where you want to have that kind of relationship. It's not that you're not going to hear from vital scientists and so on without it, but funding buys you a seat at the table. You can help motivate research and have influence if you're helping participate in the funding for that research. And the last thing I got to say is nobody thinks you can raise money until you do. I started with an organization 13 years ago that had never raised money. Like they thought $20,000 was going to be a huge leap. We're now self-funding a gene therapy project that is many multiples of millions of dollars to create. That happens over time. There are lots of different ways to do it. It's not done by bake sales, but it's very doable. And it comes from understanding the necessity and building the relationships with your scientists to understand that there's no, we looked around the corner and looked to see who was coming to help us, and we realized it was us. So I want to make it a little bit more particular and talk to you about, first, a couple projects. These are not all projects that require a lot of funding, but just in talking to a couple of the scientists, I want to talk to you quickly about a couple of projects that are immediate needs for your community, just to highlight some things that are super important. And then put some numbers on some of these things so you understand the dollars I'm talking about. This was Warren's thing. I want to talk to you about one thing, just so you understand. It was on that very first big complex chart that I shared with you. And that's a patient-focused drug development meeting with the FDA. I'm actually working on one for another disease right now. Newborn screening using pupillary contractility as a biomarker, something that's been talked about in this community before. And then I'll talk to you about some research taking place in laboratories. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about this. It's known, of course, that pupillary contractility diagnosed at, when children are born is an extraordinary biomarker. That is something that if it's seen as children are born, the absence of that ability could be a way of diagnosing this disease that would be exceptionally useful for capturing children right away. Implementing that is, if the Active Alliance, with many more people helping than there are right now, was able to start a pilot program, implementing that in maternity wards, let's say, or wherever else, could be an incredibly useful tool for beginning to understand how many more kids are in the likely population. That's something that I'm just putting out there is a task for the organization that could be a really important scientific project. The next thing I want to move to, though, is to teach you about this FDA meeting. Patient-focused drug development meetings are meetings that you apply to the FDA for. They can only be held and sponsored by the patient advocacy organization. They are the best opportunity and the only opportunity to have your story and your voice told to the FDA. They are typically half-day, three-quarters of a day meetings where you convene your entire patient population to talk to the FDA chiefly about two things. What is it like for families, patients, and caregivers to live with this disease? And what is the appetite for treatment for this disease? It's literally a chance to write the textbook from the patient perspective about the disease. After the meeting, something called the voice of the patient is written and kind of lodged at the FDA. Anytime an application to the FDA for a gene therapy or a small molecule, for any kind of application that's coming under review is filed, they have to cross-reference this document. That is, your voice will forever be heard by the FDA again when they're thinking about approving or not approving a treatment. There happens to be a consulting firm that is used by 95% of the patient advocacy groups that use this meeting. They're approximately $150,000. It's no small joke to get through the process of this meeting. It's extremely complex. And I can explain to you all the reasons why, because I'm literally halfway through working through one of these right now, so I can tell you everything about it. It's an extremely powerful meeting to have because the FDA doesn't know anything about this disease from your perspective. And when they get an application, they will get a clinical synopsis that will very nicely, because it's coming from your key doctors, explain this disease, but it's not a lot. And for them to really understand the devastating impact of what this disease is like, this is super important. So I can't emphasize enough the value of this kind of a meeting before they ever come to review any kind of an application. Just one example of the value of what a patient advocacy organization can do, but there's fundraising that goes into it. I also just wanted to highlight a few things having to do with research costs. These are some actual research costs sourced from some different clinicians and from my own knowledge of funding science. About $100,000 funds a full-time person working in a lab on gene therapy on a small molecule. I'm just trying to give you some round costs on what it takes to fund science. I just finished funding one of these myself, about 3 years of a comprehensive natural history study. I know there is a natural history study, reading them right now, it's about $85,000. A biomarker study, again, a biomarker is the kind of the thing that will change if a treatment is sort of applied. So trying to understand and validate what a biomarker is, about $25,000 a year. And $15,000 a year, you heard about the pediatric stroke education program earlier today, about $15,000 a year to fund that. So there are many things to fund. I'm trying to give you a sort of cost estimate of the sorts of things that we're talking about, because I think it's hard to talk about funding if you have kind of no concept for these things. I promised Warren at the end I would let him step in and do a little tag team on this talk, but you know, I've given you a lot of things. Some of them are aspirational and some of them are a real call to action in terms of thinking about how you can use this conference, thinking about joining in. I think in my interest in working with the Aptitude Alliance, I'm super motivated and interested in helping you guys move to the next level. This conference is extraordinarily impactful, and I think moving to the next level of advocacy and impact for where this group of extraordinary patient advocates can be in your own work is going to be truly exciting and transformative. So I'm here to help.
Can I ask a quick question?
I hope so.
What kind of timeline does it take? Like, so you have 150K and then you hire this consultant. How long does it take to get in front of the FDA? The
Yeah,
fans?
so the application is not terrible. I was a little surprised they're still holding these meetings, so let's hope they keep doing it. So from getting accepted, if you have a good rationale for having one, like with the group I'm working with, there is likely to be an IND, which is an investigational new drug application, let's say in November. The rationale was, oh, we want to have this meeting before the FDA sees this application in November. Could you please give us a meeting in September? That's a tight timeline because the acceptance was in April. That's considered kind of like, oh, we don't know. It's hard for the FDA is like a big battleship. It's hard for it. We managed to get that, but that's tight. So I would generally say they like more of like an 8-month window, but it's not horrible.
Yeah.
So the submitting the application to hearing, I would say is about 2 months. That's about the window.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Last time you were here, you talked about drug development costs.
Yep.
I know you didn't report any of those drug development costs, but those are adding zeros onto a lot of the numbers that you were talking about. I'm curious, I know it's vital for the patients and their families to get involved, but why don't the researchers ask more for specific amounts of money to the community?
Yeah, so I think the researchers have, well, I think you're gonna get requests, frankly, because I think the funding landscape is getting more contracted. There are organizations who have those seats at the table in some of those labs. And I think there are opportunities for this organization to step up.
Well, because within our community, the only time that I'm aware of any researcher specifically asked for money is when Dr. Milowitz asked for money for a study for her mice model, which there was a fundraiser to raise that $50,000 that was done. But I haven't seen any other request for any other specific amounts of money that needed to be raised.
Yeah, Cheryl?
There has been a lot of requests for funding from the community on social media. We've been running fundraisers. We've been running a fundraiser since last year to ask for support for a gene and cell therapy. We've been doing an educational campaign on gene and cell therapy to educate the community on the need for money for fundraising for gene and cell therapy. Angela has been running that program, probably tell you the specifics, but we have been asking for funding to support the gene and cell therapy work that Dr. Mussolino and her team of researchers have been working on.
I think you're also just asking why not from that specific lab. I think there hasn't been a perception that this organization has yet been able to step to that level. And so the request hasn't come, and I think I'm sort of here to say, let's get after that so we can help meet the need.
I think I'm looking for what that level is, some quantification of what
Yeah, I
the
think
level
that
is.
makes
It's not
sense.
just
I
like
think that gives
Cheryl,
you some sense of that.
yeah, says we need money. Yes, I've heard those plenty of times, but is it 100,000? Is it 1 million? Is it 10 million? What do
Yeah,
you need?
So one of the things that was presented at the last conference, and there were no specific numbers, but we know that full therapies for all of the kids out there in future research is going to require, just like you said, somewhere in the order of millions of dollars. I don't think it was actually quantified specifically, but we know that it's a huge bogey out there that we're chasing. I know that also we've been, as a community, the recipients of a lot of previous research that's already done. There's been angel donors, there's been grants that have been granted to various research groups. And one of the things that we asked Rebecca to kind of articulate for us is the fact that that funding landscape does shift from president to president, Congress to Congress, administration to administration, donor to donor, fiscal year to fiscal year. So at this point, we know that NIH funding has been slashed across the board for a lot of different programs. And we wanted to highlight the fact that the risk of this funding not being available next year is much more real than it was, a couple of years ago. So the Alliance is looking to take, just like she said, the next step in terms of our advocacy by articulating exactly the kind of cost that we're chasing, which we asked her to do at the lower level, because those are some of the closer bogeys that we can chase. But also to ramp up our fundraising so that we can assist in a more proactive manner to assist that research funding goal.
and I think sometimes it's done two ways, right? Sometimes you might say, we raise $100,000 and we, as an organization, set out a request for proposals in the area of X. And then you see what comes in, or you might identify several researchers who you think are working in the direction that the organization deems most critical for whatever the mission of the organization is, and say, we'd like to contact you and talk about the direction that your lab is working in. Let us know what your needs are. So I just think the capacity so far of this organization, partly because there's been relatively low level participation from the community, leaving the very few people who are running this organization strapped. And also because the level of fundraising hasn't been high enough, those opportunities, RFA or approaching a lab, have not yet been there.
One thing I will add on to that is that one of the initiatives that we had this last year was standing up something called a scientific medical advisory board, which is we have a number of researchers and clinicians that are involved in this. A lot of them are from MGH. We've also looked out at, out there in Texas and any other organization that wants to assist in trying to gain a better understanding as to what the environment looks like from a scientific perspective, but also to help us identify opportunities specifically in those scientific areas to invest whatever dollars we're able to fundraise. So with their advice and with their ability to help us decipher, the scientific jargon that's out there, we'll have a better understanding as to how it is that we can invest the dollars that, like I said, that we.
So Lauren, is it reasonable to say over the next year, maybe we'll hear more, not only about the needs of the community, but the accomplishments and just more conversation about the fundraising overall to keep us both informed and motivated and keep going with this goal?
Yeah, so at the very end of this conference, I have a slide that talks about some of the stuff that we've done. I will admit, we have some pretty high targets from the fundraising sphere that we haven't been able to meet just yet. We started off a little bit small because, just like she said, we've been kind of growing as an organization. That's really what we're coming to you guys to say, hey, we need some help. We need some people who are motivated and enthusiastic about getting out there, peer-to-peer fundraising, reaching out to corporate donors, large donors, anybody that who's interested in supporting the community. This is where our outreach needs to expand as a group, not just as the group that is wearing the black shirts, but everybody else who's out there in the audience. So we're hoping that increased involvement, increased investment by the community will help us to chase those higher dollar numbers. Yeah.
Two things, but I don't think your mic's on.
Sorry about that. Volume or something?
Yeah.
Rebecca, thank you, Warren. I just wanted to say that maybe you can just share to educate you. Thank you for putting that slide together to sort of explain, like, it's $100,000 for a researcher in the lab. Maybe you could share just a little bit about the costs that are needed to give perspective for everybody to understand what kind of dollars we're really talking about that we need to be fundraising towards, not just, $100,000 for one researcher in a lab. I think Dr. Mussolino has 40 researchers right now working on this gene and cell therapy, which we've been very fortunate as a community through some angel investors, which is really kind of like a gift that has come to our community, which is, I can share, I actually now work at the National Organization for Rare Disorders, and there are hundreds of patient advocacy organizations like ours that are raising money by just selling cupcakes, by car washes, and they're raising millions of dollars. And that's—
You don't raise millions of dollars in bake sale, I'm just telling you.
Well, they're raising millions of dollars, $1 at a time. But they are also doing things like Rebecca is alluding to, which is our ability to need to start to put together some more formal approaches for grants and proposals and asking for sponsorship. But maybe you can sort of explain, like, what kind of fundraising we need to be doing and what those dollars are that we're actually talking about. Because I think for a lot of people who are in the dark, we don't really understand what it takes to fundraise for a gene and cell therapy.
Yeah, it's that's quite a complicated talk, and I don't want to speak let's say about Dr. Mussolino's lab, because it's a very because when I'd like to be very specific about what she's doing, and that's not what I wanted to do right now. She's doing gene targeted therapy. There's a lot of complexities to what that lab is doing, and I'd rather frankly let her do that, but she's here. I can talk from my own experience. Let me do that because it's basically relevant. The primary disease I work on, where I'm the executive director, 13 years. It's an ultra rare myelinated lysosomal storage disorder, terrible neurodegenerative disease. The gene therapy that we spend over $85,000 for a 3-year prospective natural history probably cost us more than $150,000. Also did a retrospective natural history. The gene therapy that we are creating is going to cost about $4.5 million. Had to raise that money. That gene therapy is probably going to yield us about treatment for 7 kids. I don't want to overblow for you how many little bottles that's going to create. It's as much as we can afford. So there's a lot of realities in this business that are painful and difficult. That's not including the administration of that drug. That's probably the actual brain surgery, administration, post-op care, and follow-up is probably going to cost us about another $2 million. Also money that I had to raise. So those are like some of the numbers on just the actual manufacturing. I got a lot of contracts in my head here. The actual manufacturing contract is probably about 2.9 million, but there's a lot of other work, right? There's like toxicology studies and other animals, and there's the plasmids, and like there's just a lot of other stuff. How do you get there? There's grants. I gotta tell you, we got a couple families that do golf tournaments for us. And those are freaking awesome. Family in Arkansas just did a golf tournament last week and they raised $100,000 for me. This is a family who they just like golf. They live in a little small town. The guy is a used car salesman. These are people like you. These are not people who do anything. Wife's a stay-at-home mom. They have two little adorable kids. One of them has this disease. They are literally just the loveliest people. But these are not people who said, well, I'm going to be an expert fundraiser for a living. He's a used car salesman. But he just said, you know what? Like, I like golf. Maybe I'll turn the thing I know how to do into raising money. 2 years in a row, they've raised $100,000 for me. That's how you get to $1 million, people. It's not magic. It's not bake sales stuff. And I get tired when people are like, well, I'll do a bake sale. I'm like, nah, you're going to do a race for me. And here's how you're going to do it. I'm going to help you. I'm going to teach you how to go to sponsors because you all shop places all the time. So now you're going to go to them with your kid and you're going to be like, I'm doing a 5K race in my town or a walk or a stroller or I don't care what. And you know what? I shop at your store all the time. How about giving me a $500 sponsorship to be named in this race? Oh, yeah, you get to $10,000 pretty quickly for that, folks. It's not rocket science. I can teach you all how to do it. Takes a little work, but if you all went out and raised $10,000, you guys would have some money. You could start funding some research in a little. And you'd feel really good about participating in shaping the direction of what's going on. And it's not a bake sale, but I'll teach you how to do something more. And then you do that year over year, stuff starts to change. And someone here is going to do a golf tournament for me. No question.
It's that guy.
I mean, I'll tell you, this guy, I mean, he can teach people how to do it now. He is like a genius. Yes, ma'am.
We actually live in a golfing community.
He has a friend who lives in a golfing community.
So we could
Oh, you live in a golfing community?
Yeah, my husband.
You're gonna meet my friend Aaron Farley. He's gonna teach you everything. He is like, he's amazing. Okay.
And it's a really nice older community as well, so they are well established.
She just raised over $100,000. Right. This is how it happens.
If you need me to come out just to make sure the grains are placed.
And you get the local media to come, and your mayor comes. They have their priest come bless them. He blessed me, and I'm Jewish. I don't care. I don't care who comes and blesses me if they want to hand me $100,000 check. I don't care. I'm just telling you, this is how you raise money. This is how you get to $1 million. Like, it sounds like I had the slide there. Nobody can do it until you do it, and then you do it. There's a million other ways. Put me on Zoom.
Yeah, let's do a webinar.
You know, it's not sexy, it's not whatever, but it's like, what do I do in my life? And how do I blow it up a little bit? Am I a runner? I don't care. People have done the wackiest things. Go out and tell people, I need you to sponsor me. Anyway, I'm keeping you from lunch. I've kept you for long enough. And, you know, we can make a lot of change, folks.
Thank you, Rebecca.
My pleasure.